For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Samantha Herbst. Following the success of his first novel, The Story of Rachel de Beer, best-selling author and documentary filmmaker Brett Michael Innes joins me now to discuss the launch of his latest novel, Rachel Weeping.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Brett, going straight into it, this novel is focused on one central and tragic plot line, but also focuses on so many deep-seated issues that all South Africans face, the plight of foreign nationals being one of them. Can you elaborate a bit on why you found this such a pertinent issue to highlight?
I think if we look at what we sit with today, as South Africans, we see foreign nationals coming into our country seeking employment. Generally, they're actually really educated people who just are unable, through circumstances in their own homelands, able to find work. And they come and end up working as domestic workers, gardeners or car guards in Johannesburg or Cape Town. My background in documentary filmmaking really gave me an insight into the hopes and dreams of a lot of these foreign nationals who do see Johannesburg as a city of hope, where if they can just earn enough rands to send home, they are able to help their families survive. And I think with the recent spate of xenophobic attacks that have happened in the country, it makes for quite a relevant story for what we sit with now as a country.
In your author's note, you also mention the blurry state of post-apartheid South Africa, which really comes to the fore in the novel. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, I think for me, apartheid was, it's not to say an easier thing, but it was a very clear legal structure that a rational mind is able to look at and say, this is wrong, let's tear this down. And it was something that the country was able to do. What we're left with now is a culture which is not something legal that can be changed. The laws have changed, but the culture has remained. And I think that makes it much more difficult to change because it comes down to heart issues and the lines blur a lot more. And we sit with this murky water of what is morally right and wrong. I don't think this is something that is only something we as South Africans face. I believe the story could have played out in America with a Mexican domestic worker, in the UK with an Iranian, or in Australia with a Filipino. It looks at the lines that sit between those who are born in one country and those who travel from another to that space to better their lives. And really just focusing on the idea of how being born literally 1 kilometer west of a border can change your future.
The plot line of this novel is not necessarily linear, but jumps between the past and the present, and between the varying perspectives of the three main characters. Talk to me about how you unraveled this story.
Because this is quite a small story, it's not a big action with crazy twists and turns, it became important that actually just from a narrative level, I create something that is engaging and creates a bit of suspense and draws the audience in. Non-linear storytelling really does work this way. And it creates a bit of mystery as to what happened, which I think works really well with not only the thematics that we have in the story, but with the setting where we've placed these people in a house where they are in essence trapped together. In many ways borrowing from a thriller genre or style of storytelling. The decision to give each character a voice was so that I could hear or express their thought life. With this narrative having the desire to show the different voices and thoughts of a specific topic, it didn't make sense for me to only stick with Rachel's point of view or with Michelle's, but to rather flip between 3 points of view on the same topic and to see how they all relate to the moment.
So speaking of the characters, of the three of them, one is male, Chris, and therefore directly relatable to you.
Mm-hmm.
The others comprise Michelle, a privileged white pregnant woman living in a wealthy suburb in Johannesburg. The other, Rachel, Michelle's a domestic worker, struggling to make ends meet. How exactly did you prepare yourself to get into the minds and bodies of these women?
Yeah, I'm the single white South African male who's telling the story of motherhood and loss from the perspective of two women. It is quite an interesting one, and there is a debate that exists within the writing world of whether you write what you know, so to write what your experiences are in or where you have insight, and whether I actually as a white male have the right and authority to describe a situation or give voice to a black woman or white woman, a foreign national. My perspective is that as much as writing what you know is important for describing textures and bringing layers in which only someone who's been in that situation could bring. I think the voice of an outsider is sometimes even more powerful than the voice of a storyteller who is in the situation, because there's less of a bias towards representing just that specific voice, and more of an objectivity that comes where if the writer does their job right, and that's what I tried to do, was that I listened, and I listened to the Rachels that I'd interacted with, to the Michelles that I'd interacted with, and tried to find out what their thoughts were so that I could give an accurate representation of who these women are, what motherhood is, what loss is, what it is to be a foreign national in South Africa, what it is to be a South African employing a foreign national.
Okay. So tell me about the title, Rachel Weeping, and how it ties in with the inscription at the beginning of the novel, which you took from Jeremiah.
Yeah. For me, my inspiration for stories comes from various places, either from a piece of art, an event or moment I've experienced, or something I've read. And the inspiration for the story actually came from a passage from Hebrew scripture by the prophet Jeremiah, and that's later echoed in Christian writings in the book of Matthew, which says, "A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping, great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are no more." And just those two words, Rachel weeping, just conjured up this image to me of a mother over the body of her child, completely broken at the death that had just taken place. And that really was the seed that gave birth to the story that we have today. Earlier versions of the novel really didn't have anything to do with foreign nationals, xenophobia, rather just the experience of mothers. But my travel into the continent really just made it clear that this was the kind of story that it needed to become, and it morphed. At one stage, Rachel was from Zimbabwe, but a trip to Mozambique just made it clearer to me that she needed to come from a place where there was water, because that's one of the poetic elements in the novel. And the thing which really came as quite a surprise for me was only a couple of months ago, when I was writing the foreword for the book, I decided to look at the context that that passage of writing from Jeremiah was written into. And it was actually written by the prophet to the Hebrew people when they were in exile in Babylon, in essence foreign nationals in a land that was not their own. And I just love the way it's almost like the story of the foreign national, even though separated by almost 2,000 years of writing, just wants to be told again. And the passage actually goes on to say, refrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from tears, there's hope in your future. Your children will return to the land of their forefathers. And in a way that I feel is truthful and not a Hollywood happy ending, I do honor that promise that the children will return to the land of their parents. If you read the book, you'll know exactly how it is.
Yeah, for sure. Your first novel, Rachel Weeping, was set in South Africa in the 1800s, whereas Rachel Weeping showcases modern-day Johannesburg. Why the change of scenery?
I think because I'm a filmmaker, it's a lot easier for us to move between genres and different types of stories, whereas if it's an author, if it's a Nicholas Spark fan base, they want him to write a romantic drama set in the Carolinas. If it's Dan Brown, it has to have this espionage, religious kind of thing. So I struggle with the box of being placed into, I can only write one type of story. I do like stories that are set in Africa, and that is why I chose to do two vastly different narratives. I think also the fact that I'm English, and I told the story of Rachel Weeping, which is like, that's one of the volksverhaal of the Afrikaans people, yet again, and shows an outsider seeing a value in a story and just wanting to bring a good story to life. So I hope I'm enabled with that freedom in future, just to write stories that are beautiful and not necessarily have to stick to stories that fit in within a genre or style of storytelling.
So very exciting. Rachel Weeping has been made into a feature film, which you directed. Tell me more.
Yeah, I have an interesting model of storytelling or writing, which sees me writing a screenplay and a novel at the same time. And we actually headed into production on the film for Rachel Weeping before the book even hit the shelves. The film is titled Sink. It's an Afrikaans title, and it's actually an Afrikaans language film. We have KykNet on board. They were one of the companies who really saw the potential in the story. And we decided to change the title to an Afrikaans title to match the market. And yeah, it stars Anel Alexander from Semi-Soet and Franse Trein, Jacques Bessinger from Ballade vir 'n Enkeling, and this incredible young actress called Shoki Mokapo, who actually was in first-year film school with me. So we've come a long way together, and it's been such a pleasure to see her bring the character of Rachel to life. Such an incredible actress. And yeah, the film will come out next year, early next year. Right now we're just finishing with the edit and the sound design and getting ready for the festivals.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
good luck. It's
Thank
very
you.
exciting.
Thanks.
So what next? What's next for Brett Michael Ennis?
Jeez, what next? I have to finish making the movie, so that's still a few months of that happening. In the meantime, just writing. I have a book, coming-of-age comedy set in Johannesburg, just post-94, called The Reggie's Rush. If you remember the Reggie's Toy Rush, immediately you know where it's going to head. And then I'm currently writing another novel called Peace on Paper, which is set in an IDP camp in South Sudan, and it looks at the lives of the aid workers in an incredibly extreme environment, a war zone where they are trying to save lives while also dealing with just normal office politics and things that go on. Yeah.
It's all very exciting. Best of luck to you.
Thanks
Thank
so
you for
much.
joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That was South African author Brett Michael Ennis on the launch of his latest novel, Rachel Weeping.